You can count when you're happy. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can count when you're sad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or count when you're frightened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count when you're mad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Counting is wonderful. Counting is marvelous. Counting's terrific. And how?
The episode opens with your typical slimly motivated murder by Kryptofreak when Ian Randall gets a C in his metalworking class and kills his teacher, Mr. Frankel, because he's looking to graduate from high school as a sophomore and there's an Ivy League scholarship he can't get if he doesn't have a perfect 4.0. Ian starts dating both Chloe and Lana at the same time because he needs their peer recommendations to get his scholarship, and this is just the excuse the episode needs to bog most of its time down with poorly manufactured drama about Clark being jealous of the two girls he's nearly dated, and they both alienate him for warning them about a guy they very obviously shouldn't trust. We discover his power later than usual. He's able to do twice the schoolwork and date two girls at once because he has the ability to split himself in two, or more accurately, to asexually birth a clone of himself out of his back. Meanwhile, Jonathan breaks his leg in a completely normal, non-kryptonite-related farming accident. I was a little shocked. And Martha comes to the hospital hours late because of her job at Luther Corp. The theme this episode is overextending yourself and choosing your priorities. Martha and Jonathan have the tough conversations about this they've been needing to have, and by the end, Jonathan decides to be the bigger man and admit that not only is Martha's job an extreme financial asset, even though he hates the Luthers, and I still think she was insane to expect him to ever be okay with it, considering Lionel's whole adoption ultimatum, Jonathan realizes that Martha is a lot like he is. He works too hard, pushes himself too far, and that's how he broke his leg. There's also a subplot setting up a new ongoing love interest for Lex, Helen Bryce. Helen is Jonathan's doctor and also happens to have a bad temper. She meets Lex in an anger management class after drop-kicking an orderly, which is the sort of thing that is never fair to just mention off-screen. If she had said she punched an orderly, okay, but a drop-kick? There should have been a scene. Lex is there because he took a 9-iron to a parking attendant's car. That we do get to see, and it's kind of awesome. And honestly, considering all these flimsy reasons the bad guys have for attacking people in the show, shouldn't everyone in Smallville have to go to anger management class just for good measure? Besides the idea of dichotomy, Lex and Helen being two entirely different people who don't look like they'd fit together but end up dating by the end anyway, this doesn't have much to do with the rest of the episode. But Lex and Helen do have some chemistry and a temper in common, and it's a nice change of pace for Lex. Dating someone for a while, not doing it to ruin a rival company, and not marrying her the same episode where we meet her. It is odd that Lex keeps running into girls he met doing something embarrassing that they remember but he doesn't. Here, she says she was working at Metropolis General one night when he was there throwing up all over the place, and early on in Season 1, Lana says she caught Lex skinny dipping when she was 10. What's that about? Clark, after realizing that Ian keeps somehow being on 2 dates at the same time with Chloe and Lana, decides to test him by pretending to page him as both Lana and Chloe. Yeah, a little dated, he carries a pocket pager. And he has Pete go to the Talon to meet him at the same time as Clark does. Sure enough, he's at both places at once. So once Lana and Chloe realize Ian's been playing them, like Clark has warned them the whole episode, he tries to kill them for no other reason than we've got 10 minutes left and Kryptofreaks gotta be homicidal. There's an exciting fight over a bridge. Clark lets one Ian die but not the other, so I don't know if that even counts as a Kryptofreak death. And the episode closes with Lana and Chloe apologizing for not believing him, but also saying they had every reason not to. Clark leaves smiling and looking quite satisfied with their conversation, even though nothing was even remotely resolved. As he walks away, we see two businesses right next to the Talon I never noticed before. There's a flapjack house and what must be a really tiny hotel. Then credits. We've got a pretty standard Kryptofreak episode here, but it's structured a little more interestingly than normal. I like that even though he kills someone before the opening titles, I really probably should have counted pre-titles deaths this whole time. It happens a lot. We don't know what Ian's power is for several scenes. We don't even have reason to assume, really, that there's anything supernatural about him, except the formula and the fact that our main characters keep finding excuses to say things like, "I wish there were two of me," constantly. It's nice that we don't immediately see what he can do and then have to watch Clark figure it out. We don't know about it much earlier than Clark does, and the way Ian's ability is handled is clever enough I don't mind, especially when we see both Ians get in cars with Lana and Chloe in the same scene. Ian has an unusual, atypical power, and Mark Verheiden has some fun with it. Verheiden so far has written mostly mediocre episodes like X-Ray and Shimmer, but he also wrote Rogue, the Sam Phelan episode, which is one of Clark's very best character episodes. He handles Clark as best as can be expected here. He could be irritatingly brooding about this other guy moving in on Lana, and I don't know why he'd be too broken up over anybody not homicidal dating Chloe, considering breaking it off before it started was her call back in Vortex, despite Ian having his facts wrong when he says it was Clark who shut things down with her. Clark is clearly unhappy about Lana dating another guy and isn't great at hiding it, but that in no way whatsoever plays into his motivations for warning Lana and Chloe about Ian. When you think one of your friends is going out with a guy, and then you see that guy making out with your other friend in the hallway, you say something. And no, Lana, I don't care if he's got proof or not. This is high school, not a courtroom. Clark is being a good friend, and I like that despite Lana and Chloe treating him like dirt, he keeps investigating Ian, not to meddle in their affairs, but to make sure they're both safe. Smallville High is the superpower killer capital of the world, and Chloe seems to be forgetting that the last guy Clark warned her about was also a homicidal maniac and tried to take her out by telekinetically flailing a chainsaw at her. Ian, of course, is played by Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and he does a fine job, acting plenty charming and charismatic as he seduces our easily seducible leading ladies. Though that's being a little too hard on Chloe, I suppose. We don't get much of an explanation at all for what Lana sees in Ian, but if this guy hadn't turned out to be a nut job, why they're attracted to each other is very clear, and they'd be quite compatible. He and Chloe are both academic, both overachievers, and both only children. Lana doesn't have any siblings either, but again, that element isn't explored with her. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, or JTT as he was referred to by his many swooning female teenage fans in the 90s, was extremely popular on the sitcom Home Improvement with Tim Allen. It's unfortunate that the episode seems to be riding on his star power rather than giving him anything interesting to do, and he seems like a good enough actor that he could have handled some real character stuff. For once, there's actually a subplot that's more interesting to me than Lex's, and that's Jonathan and Martha's, which I've already discussed. I'm glad the idea of stretching oneself too thin is explored with them when it's only a gimmick instead of a theme with the Ian story. There is some real forward momentum happening with the conflict between Jonathan and Martha since she started working for Lionel. Jonathan agrees to let Martha make her own choices without assuming she cares more about her own ambition than her family, rather than her having a character arc where she decides she's wrong to work for Lionel, as I might have expected. As I said, I think there was a wasted opportunity with the Kryptofreak here to really explore this kid's tendency to overextend himself, maybe delve into his backstory a little, and tell us why he's such an overachiever. We don't even meet this guy's parents, and how being stretched too thin drives him insane, even with superpowers to help him. Obviously, you'd still want to keep the focus on your main characters and not let the Kryptofreak take over, as we've seen with episodes like Cool, but Ian could have been fleshed out and made a lot more believable, I think, and his motivation, just wanting to get ahead in life, is interesting enough I kind of wanted to see it. I also want to know more about how his powers work, because out of a couple dozen Kryptofreaks, his is the power most unlike any I've seen before. When Ian Xeroxes off another copy of himself, what happens to that copy later? Does he have to somehow integrate it back into himself? Only one Ian dies at the end. Will he be able to make others? In hindsight, I know the answer to that. He's going to appear one more time, and will indeed, in that episode, make another copy of himself. And that only makes me wonder about it more. Is the first copy that died the only one he's used before, or have there been others wandering around? And what about the more metaphysical questions? The other Ian doesn't have exactly the same experiences as the original, and as the saying goes, we are the sum of our experiences. But he appears to be just an extension of the original. This is an interesting idea that I'm not sure the episode really had the time to explore, and this too might have meant spending too much time with the Kryptofreak over our main characters. But I can't help but wonder about it. If this power had been used for something a little more thought-provoking than what's done here, I'd say this would have been a perfect time for a two-parter, or maybe even a recurring Kryptofreak over 3 or 4 episodes. And sticking with that killer Kryptofreak formula, we've got to take a smart kid and make him stupid enough so that he can be beaten by Clark. The only possible explanation is that he's psychotic. I guess that's what the title means in this context. An insane person who is actually multiple people is dichotic, because his plan makes no sense. I understand why he kills Frankel, his metal shop professor, though surely he could have come up with a cleaner way to forge that A than stabbing his teacher and throwing him in a closet. If only that guy hadn't been a conceited and disgruntled old man with delusions of tenure. I think we've all had teachers like that. But he has no reason at all to go after Chloe and Lana at the end. When he inevitably decides they know too much and it's time for them to die, all they've deduced is that he really is trying to date both of them at the same time. They clearly don't know about his powers even. He says, "I won't let you ruin my life," and that seems to imply that somehow they're realizing he likes dating two girls simultaneously, means they're going to get in the way of his scholarship somehow. But Captain Logan, you say, they won't help him get his scholarship now. So he's going to risk covering up more murders? Why doesn't he, I don't know, find more people who can give him peer recommendations? He actually makes less sense than Sasha Woodman, the bee-controlling girl from Drone who was obsessed with being class president. At least she was getting pressure from her parents. I don't know why this kid is so insanely driven at all. As for my issues with Lana and Chloe this episode, yes, Clark has treated them both badly recently, mostly when he was on Red Kryptonite. It's irritating that he can't just come out and tell them that he shouldn't be held responsible for that because he wasn't in control of his actions, but from their perspectives, they have every reason not to trust him right now. However, they also blindly trust this guy they just met, Ian, whom they know nothing about and isn't even trying very hard to cover the fact that he's dating them both, so they look like idiots the entire episode, especially at the point when Clark claims Ian tried to kill him, and because that, at first, seems impossible, Chloe completely dismisses it out of hand, despite every impossible thing she's seen in Smallville previously, and despite having dated the telekinetic chainsaw massacre. It's also clear at the end that both girls are still interested in Clark, and either would probably start dating him right now if he were to ask them, regardless of all the things he's done to make them distrust him. If they still want him, but they don't trust him, then they're completely selfish and I have no sympathy for them. I do like that they realize how stupid they were being by the end. It's a little bit of a step up, I guess, but there's too much yeah but in their backhanded apology. Both are typical self-centered teenage girls this episode, and it makes a lot of scenes really cringeworthy for me. Well, I've got no questions to ask Jarrell when I get to heaven this week, so on to the scoreboard. We have one S-Shielder insignia, that's Clark's project in the metal shop at the beginning. I have no idea why Frankel doesn't like that. Looked fine to me. We've got one Kryptofreak, that's Ian Randall. His crypto power is he splits himself in two, and his villain motivation, there may be two of me, and I could probably use that to get ahead in the world illegally, but I'm going to use that advantage to get ahead the normal way. Studying hard, going to a great school, and I'll only murder people if I really have to. Nah, I'm a Kryptofreak. I'll murder people just because I feel like it. We've got one love triangle, that's Ian, Chloe, and Lana. I guess it's a little more like a love rectangle when you throw Clark in there, but I'll count it anyway. We've got two instances of people walking away angry, of course. When Lana tells Clark to stay out of her and Chloe's business if he doesn't have any facts, and then when Chloe tells Clark he can't imagine someone wanting to be with her over Lana. We've got one instance of convenient unconsciousness, that's Chloe when Clark catches her after Ian drops her off a bridge. By the way, it's hard to imagine that Lana standing there doesn't see Clark do anything super. And I guess we only sort of have a Kryptofreak death this week because we see him die, but he's not actually the real Kryptofreak, he's just sort of a clone. So I suppose we won't count it this time. I'm going to give Dichotic a 2 out of 4. Some decent plotting for a really average Kryptofreak story, but alas, it is a really average Kryptofreak story, and there's way too much forced teen angst for my taste. Was there anything I missed in any category? Leave me a personal message on Geekvolution, and I'll be sure to add it to the count. I'm Captain Logan, and consider this episode counted.